Francesco Turrisi, musical alchemist as the press call you. You play so many different instruments in so many different styles. But I think it's true to say that the piano really is your first love.
Yes, well, I should say first, as a great multi-instrumentalist friend of mine says, I own a lot of instruments. Playing is a different story.
Do you know how many instruments you own, roughly?
No, my daughter says we have a music shop.
Because you play keyboards, you play percussion, you play plucked instruments.
Accordion, I play a little bit plucked instruments, certain type of lutes, things that are a little bit invented. But yeah, most of them are, I kind of do my own thing, you know, because they're all instruments that have a long tradition, which takes a long time to study. So I obviously can't do that with every instrument. I did that a little bit with the piano. That's the instrument that I studied the most, as you were saying that. I did a BA and a master's in jazz piano in The Hague, in the conservatory in The Hague in the Netherlands. So yeah, that is the instrument that I feel the most comfortable with.
And when you were in The Hague, that's when you became interested in early music, because of course the Netherlands is a great place for early music.
Yes, there was a very big early music department. I have to say honestly, until then I had no idea what it was even, you know, as a concept. So I got a little bit interested because of the improvisational side of it, you know. There's supposed to be quite a lot of improvisation in early music performance practice. And there are some similarities with jazz in terms of the mentality, the way the musicians approach the music, much more freedom as well compared to sort of regular classical music. So I got interested in that while I was in The Hague, and I studied a little bit of harpsichord, basso continuo, which is a accompanying technique, which is improvised, and did a bit of research on improvisation in 17th century music mostly.
But you also play world music?
Yes, I have a great interest in loads of different types of music. World music, as you know, is a terrible, very generic term, you know. But I've studied quite a bit of different types of music from the Mediterranean area. So obviously from southern Italy, which is kind of where my family comes from, but also neighboring countries, because they're all very interconnected, you know. So North Africa, different types of Arabic music, Turkish music, which I really love, both classical music, Ottoman music, and traditional music from Greece and other things like that.
I think you started with piano, and it feels a little bit of late that you've come back to piano playing quite a lot. It's
kind of tricky because when you own a lot of instruments, as I do, people always ask you to play a lot of instruments, you know, and it is almost bizarre as the only thing that I really studied, which is jazz piano, people never ask me to play. So lately it's true because, again, as I said before, is the one that I feel the most comfortable with, but also in a way I find that there is a way of kind of condensing all of my musical experiences in the piano.
We're in Kilkenny today because, well, I live here in Kilkenny, but you are no stranger to this town because you've been here for so many years playing at the Arts Festival. But also you and I have recorded a few albums here, and you recently recorded a piano solo album, as it happens. Tell us a bit about the album.
The repertoire for this album is all my music, I think, except one traditional Italian song, which I love to play. I played it for many years. The rest is my compositions, you know, so I like to think this album is quite autobiographical, you could say, you know. It's a little bit, as I said already, my experience as a musician, you know, and it's kind of a maybe midlife crisis album. I don't know. It's kind of gets to a point where everything is sort of condensed into my experience, you know, my life experience as a musician. I want to call this album Northern Migrations, which again kind of looks into something that happened throughout my whole life, you know, and even before I was born, my parents emigrated from Sicily to northern Italy, and then I went from northern Italy, from Torino, which is where I grew up, to the Netherlands first, and then keep going north to Ireland, which is where I ended up. And it's interesting because it's obviously a geographical migration, you know. Also migration obviously is a term that is very much discussed these days. And this is, to all effects, you know, migrations. We always just like to talk about very different type of people that are forced to migrate, but I don't see this in a very different way. It's obviously a privileged migrations, but it's similar, you know, in terms of what it actually means. So, and geographical, but also just as a musical experience, because in all of these places, all of these movements, things were picked up along the way, musically and life experiences. So it is northern migrations, I guess.
When you talk about your compositions, I think it's probably fair to say that it's part composition that you worked out and part improvisation, because there's a lot of improvisation in what you do in your music.
No, that's for sure. I mean, I come from jazz, as I said before. I can hardly dissociate the two things, you know. So when I say composition is obviously a very pretentious term, and you know, I imagine someone sitting at a desk writing a symphony, you know, which is not obviously what I do, or probably wouldn't be able to do it. For me, composition even comes always out of improvisation. So all my tunes are usually defined by improvising at the piano, like developing ideas and then kind of condensing them into something a bit smaller. But usually then in performance, those are expanded to full improvisation. So the format in my tunes is mostly always a little bit like jazz tunes. There are melodies, there are chords, but then there is improvisation around melodies and chords. So they're more like tunes, you could say, you know, more than compositions. Some other pieces are more true composed. There are a couple of pieces on the album which actually have no improvisation at all, but that's a bit of an exception for me, you know. I like to have always the improvisational element.
It's quite a soulful feel to the music that you write, actually. Dare I say a little bit melancholic?
Yeah, I guess so. It's not something conscious. This is what comes out, I guess.
So I think this new album is quite reflective, really.
Yeah, there is definitely, and there is definitely a bit of that kind of mood. This is type of music that I'm attracted to normally in general. Melancholic, as you said, pensive. I don't know exactly how to describe it, you know, but it comes naturally as that.